Another powerful story from Bene AfriTales TV. Before we continue, please comment where in the part of America or the world you are watching from. Thank you. The people of Yumun believed that a festival without yam stew was like a moonless night, dark, incomplete, and lacking in joy. In the week before the Ohu harvest festival, the air thickened with the smell of roasting yams, frying peppers, and palm oil bubbling in clay pots. Women's laughter carried from the cooking sheds, the men tuned their drums in the village square. Children darted between compounds like restless goats. Among all these moving parts was Okorie, round of belly, quick of hand, and shameless in his hunger. If the smell of food had feet, it would lead directly to his hut. He had a way of arriving at people's compounds just as the soup pot was opened, leaning on his walking stick as though it had dragged him there against his will. "Ah, my legs have a mind of their own," he would say, before swallowing 3 balls of pounded yam meant for the household head. It was common to see him at the palm wine stand in the evening, his lips wet and his eyes half closed in the lazy joy of a man who had eaten well. The villagers often joked that Okorie's stomach was a god of its own, always demanding sacrifices. But as the old saying went, when the stomach grows bigger than the head, the man will follow his belly into the grave. On the morning of the festival, the women of Yumun cooked the sacred yam stew for the gods, a thick, steaming dish of white yam, palm oil red as sunset, dried fish, and fresh leaves. The air trembled with its aroma. Young men carried it to the sacred grove under the watchful eyes of the priest, Dikiocha, and placed it beneath the great Udara tree. There it would sit until the gods had eaten and blessed the village with another year of bounty. Okorie watched from a distance, his lips shining, his stomach rumbling like thunder over a parched land. His wife, Mwakigo, caught his gaze and slapped his arm. Okorie. Don't even think of it. You will not bring shame on me and my children this year." He only laughed, but inside him, hunger stirred like a restless child. As the sun fell, the drums rose, and the village feasted on other foods. Yet for Okorie, all the meats and drinks could not silence the memory of the stew's smell. Night crept into Yumun like a thief. The dancing ended. Fires dwindled to embers. The village lay still. But in Okorie's hut, sleep fled from him. The smell of the sacred stew clung to his mind like smoke to cloth. He rose quietly, tying his wrapper, and slipped out into the darkness. The moon had hidden behind clouds, and the path to the grove was lined with tall shadows. His heart thumped, not with fear, but with the thrill of forbidden food. Under the Udara tree, the calabash sat waiting, steam curling into the cool air. Okorie bent over it, scooping yam into his mouth, gulping the palm oil broth until it dripped down his chin. He ate like a man who believed the gods had no eyes. Then, as he swallowed the last morsel, a deep, rolling thump broke the night silence. Another came, faster, louder. The talking drum in the village square was beating by itself, the sound so heavy it seemed to press against his chest. Okorie froze, stew still warm in his belly, as the drum's voice filled the air, loud, restless, and unending. The night was split open by the drum's voice. It was not the quick, playful beat of moonlight dances, nor the sharp calls of war. This was a deep, steady pounding, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Huts flickered with the light of oil lamps as people stirred, muttering. Children clung to their mothers' wrappers, eyes wide. The men gathered at the square, their shadows long under the wavering torchlight. The drum sat in the center, Iknan-ta, the ancestral talking drum, its hide stretched tight, the carvings on its wooden body glistening with fresh dew. No hands touched it, yet it spoke. Abedike, the village drummer, was among the first to arrive. He swore by his father's grave that he had not played it. "Even if hunger killed me, I would never wake Iknan-ta without the priest's word," he said, his voice trembling. But the drum ignored him, its beat as unrelenting as a hammer on iron. Some villagers whispered that the gods had descended to dance. Others muttered about omens, bad ones. Mama Nina, the oldest woman in Yumun, shook her head. "Drums do not wake alone unless they are calling the guilty," she said. At dawn, the drum was still beating. It did not pause for the cock's crow, nor for the morning prayers at the shrine. The priest, Dikiocha, came and stood before it, his white robe stirring faintly in the early breeze. His face was grave. "This is not the voice of joy," he told the gathering. "This is the voice of debt." Okorie kept to the back of the crowd, arms folded, eyes avoiding the priests. His stomach, which had been proud the night before, now felt like a bag of stones. He told himself that the drum had nothing to do with him. The gods had eaten the stew in spirit. What harm could a few morsels in the belly of a mortal do? But that night, when the moon returned to her throne in the sky, Okorie's sleep was broken by a strange dream. He found himself standing in a place that was neither day nor night. The sky was red, the ground a mirror that reflected no light. Around him, faceless dancers moved in slow circles, their feet making no sound. In their hands, they held spoons carved from bone, and they dipped them into bowls that never emptied. They chanted in low, rolling voices. "The hands that feed themselves before feeding the spirits will one day feed the earth with themselves." Okorie tried to speak, but his tongue was heavy. The dancers turned toward him as one, and though they had no faces, he felt their eyes pierce him. Somewhere beyond the circle, a drum pounded, the same unending beat from the village square. He woke with a start, sweat slick on his skin, his heart drumming in time with Aiknanta. Outside his hut, the air was still, but the sound was there, deep, steady, and closer than it should have been. Okorie pressed his hands to his ears, but the beat was inside him now. Life in Yumun tried to walk on as though nothing was wrong, but the drum's voice was like a stubborn thorn in the foot, each step reminded the people it was still there. The market opened as usual. Traders arranged piles of peppers, dried fish, and cassava. Palm wine tappers staggered in with calabashes on their shoulders. Children ran in circles, playing games. Yet no one could pretend for long. The unending thump-thump haunted every conversation, a shadow that would not move away no matter where the sun stood. Okorie made his way through the market that morning, pretending to buy groundnut oil. But everywhere he turned, eyes followed him. Some women paused their gossip when he came near. Others looked him over as though measuring the size of his belly against the god's anger. He laughed loudly to cover his discomfort, but inside, unease stirred like a trapped bird. Mama Nina sat by her mat of kola nuts, her thin lips pressed tight. "Okorie," she called, her voice sharp as pepper. "Do you remember the last time Aiknanta beat without hands?" Okorie swallowed. "I was not yet born, Mama." She nodded slowly. "It was 70 harvests ago. A man broke a bargain with the spirits. By the time the drum stopped, 3 rainy seasons had passed and the village had buried more mouths than it could feed. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Goats wandered away from their owners and refused to eat the fresh cassava leaves placed before them. The yam fields turned yellow at the tips, as though fire had brushed against them in the night. The river, which had always run clear, now carried a faint red tinge, like palm oil spilled in water. Each dawn, the villagers woke to find the drum still beating, steady, unbroken, relentless. Some people began to leave offerings at the foot of the drum, thinking perhaps it had grown hungry like a man. Palm wine, roasted plantain, kola nuts, all disappeared, yet the sound did not stop. In the evenings, small groups gathered to talk in low voices. The same question passed from mouth to mouth: who has angered the gods? The priest, Dikiocha, moved silently among the people, listening. He did not accuse anyone, but his eyes lingered on faces longer than before. Whenever his gaze swept past Okorie, the glutton felt a cold finger run down his spine. One night, Okorie sat in his hut, staring at the oil lamp. The beat of the drum was there, always there, like another heartbeat beside his own. He told himself that the gods had no use for human food, that the stew was merely a symbol. But even as the thought came, another voice in him whispered, you ate what was not yours. It was past midnight when a shadow fell across his doorway. The priest stood there, white-robed ghostly in the darkness, his staff in hand. Okorie, Daikiocha said quietly, the drum calls to the one who owes. A debt is not erased because it is swallowed. The spirits do not forget. Okorie's mouth went dry. I don't understand you, Daikiocha. The priest's eyes held his. You will. The one the drum calls will either answer, or the whole village will pay the price. Before Okorie could speak, the priest turned and walked away, his footsteps fading into the night. Yet the drum's voice grew louder in Okorie's ears, as if mocking him. That night, when sleep finally came, it brought with it the faceless dancers again, closer now, their spoons tapping against the bowls in rhythm with the drum. This time, one dancer reached out a hand toward him, and though its fingers were made of smoke, Okorie felt them grip his arm. He woke gasping, his ears full of the drum's unending beat. Somewhere outside, a goat bleated in terror. By the seventh night, Okorie had stopped pretending to sleep. The drum's beat had moved beyond sound, it had entered his bones. It followed him even in moments of silence, when he fetched water at dawn, when he squatted to relieve himself in the bush, when he tried to chew roasted maize at the palm wine stand. In the market, women no longer hid their suspicion. A drum does not beat without a dancer, one said loudly as he passed. Another added, and the dancer is never far. Mwakigo, his wife, had grown restless. She asked why the priest came to their compound twice that week and left without eating kola nut. Okorie told her it was nothing. But when she pressed, he barked, must a man report every shadow that passes his doorstep? She stopped asking, yet her eyes followed him with worry. One night, the moon hung low, swollen and yellow, casting long shadows on the path to the sacred grove. Okorie had no plan to walk that way, yet his feet betrayed him. It was as if the drum itself pulled a cord tied around his ankles. He left his hut quietly, moving like a thief, though the only thing he carried was his own guilt. The village lay silent except for the drum's unending voice, which grew louder with each step. Fireflies danced in the tall grass, but even their glow seemed wary. When the path narrowed, the air changed, thicker, cooler, as if he had stepped into another world. Ahead, under the great Udara tree, the priest Daikiocha stood waiting. The white of his robe gleamed in the moonlight. A clay pot of palm oil sat at his feet, and beside it, a bundle of fresh yam tubers. Okorie, Daikiocha said, his voice low but clear, do you know why Iknantop eats without rest? Okorie's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the ground. The priest lifted his staff. That stew you ate was no ordinary food. It was an offering to Okaik, the spirit of creation. For generations, Yumun has renewed a bargain with him each harvest, feed the spirit, and the land will feed the people. You broke that bargain. Okorie's knees weakened. But, it was only food. The gods. The gods eat in ways men cannot understand, Daikiocha cut in. To you, it was stew. To the spirit, it was a seal. You have unsealed it. Now, Okaik calls for payment. The priest's eyes glinted. If the drum beats until the next moon, the yam fields will die. The river will dry. Hunger will walk through every hut. The only way to silence it is to replace what you took, with more than you took. A feast greater than the stolen one. Cooked with your own hands, seasoned with truth, and offered here, before the eyes of the whole village. Okorie's breath came hard. He imagined the mocking stares of the villagers, the laughter of his enemies, the shame that would cling to his family's name. If you refuse, Daikiocha said, stepping closer, the gods will take the payment themselves. And they will take it in blood. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of earth after rain, though no rain had fallen. Above them, the Udara tree's branches swayed without wind, as if nodding to the priest's words. The drum, somewhere beyond the grove, beat faster, louder, pressing against Okorie's chest until it hurt to breathe. He wanted to run. He wanted to shout that it was a mistake. But deep inside, he knew the truth: a man may outrun the sun, but he cannot outrun his shadow. Go, the priest said finally, lowering his staff. Prepare yourself. The gods are patient, but their patience is not without end. Okorie turned and stumbled down the path. The beat followed him, matching his footsteps, until he could no longer tell which was his heart and which was the drum. The news spread like harmattan fire: Okorie was to cook the offering for the gods. By dawn, every hut knew. Some laughed and said the gods had finally found a way to tie the glutton to a mortar. Others waited in silence, for they knew the task was no jest. Okorie rose before the cocks crow. Mwakigo had gathered the yams, fresh vegetables, palm oil, and dried fish. She worked without complaint, though her eyes held the weight of fear. Outside, neighbors lingered, pretending to pass by while stealing glances at the shameful spectacle. He tied his wrapper tight, washed his hands in cold water, and began to pound yam. Sweat rolled down his face, dripping into the mortar. The pestle rose and fell in a steady rhythm, echoing the drum that still beat in the square. Each time he stopped to rest, he imagined the gods tapping their fingers, waiting. By evening, the feast was ready: yam pounded until it stretched like silk, stew thick and rich with the scent of roasted fish, pepper, and fresh greens. The aroma filled the compound, but no one dared taste it. This was food no mortal could claim. The priest, Daikiocha, arrived with the elders. "It is time," he said. The feast was placed in a large clay bowl, wrapped in white cloth, and carried to the sacred grove. The villagers followed in silence, forming a procession under the full moon. Even the children, usually restless, walked as though they knew the gods were watching. The path to the grove glowed in the moonlight, and the Udara tree loomed ahead like a great, patient witness. The clay bowl was placed before the shrine. The drum's voice, which had been steady for days, now grew wild, fast, loud, urgent. Okorie stepped forward, his hands trembling. "Speak your truth," Daikiocha commanded. Okorie cleared his throat, his voice breaking. "I took what was not mine. I fed my belly before feeding the spirits. I have cooked this with my own hands, that the gods may eat and forgive me." He set the bowl down, bowed low until his forehead touched the earth, and stepped back. The air thickened. The branches of the Udara tree swayed without wind. The drum's beat quickened, then slowed, slower, slower still, until it stopped completely. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound had ever been. The villagers stood frozen, listening to the absence of the drum. Then, as if released from a spell, they exhaled together. Daikiocha raised his staff. "The bargain is renewed." A low cheer rose, timid at first, then growing. Women clapped, children danced, and the men began to hum the festival songs. The people of Yumun walked back to the village in relief, the shadows of fear lifting. But as Okorie followed behind, he felt something. It was faint, almost hidden, but there it was. A soft, slow thump deep within his chest. He paused, pressing his hand to his heart. It could have been his own pulse. Or it could have been Aiknan Ta, reminding him that a debt once paid is still remembered. Under the pale moon, Okorie walked on, each step in time with that quiet, unending beat. Dear viewers, what lesson did you pick out from this powerful tale? Comment how the story made you feel. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notifications buttons.